Russia announced troop withdrawal, but remains watchful and ever threatening. Russian Defense Ministry released the video of Russian fighters intercepting hypothetical enemy plane, a move which gives everyone doubt their intentions are for real.
Russian fighter Su-35 intercepted a hypothetical enemy and forced it to land on the Belarusian airfield. It was part of the Russian-Belarus joint military drills Allied resolved.
I found the intruding plane with the help of radio locating means. Went down, identified it visually. I then forced to land it on the airfield of departure by command of the governing authority.
These exercises entered a decisive phase last week and have another few days to go before they are finally over on 20th February. Ukrainian capital is about 75 kilometers from the location of these drills in south of Belarus border. Russia massed its troops near the Ukraine border and sent them to exercises in neighboring Belarus. The move caused tension for weeks now, but Kremlin insistently denied any possibility to launch an offensive against Ukraine.
As for the observation of the continuing hysteria, of course, I wouldn't say it amuses us, but it profoundly puzzles us. The West feels entitled to dictate how we should behave, whatever we do on our territory. This is a basic lack of education.
Russia and Ukraine have been locked in bitter conflict since 2014. Ukraine's Kremlin-friendly leader was driven from office by a popular uprising 8 years ago. Moscow responding by annexing Crimea and then backing a separatist insurgency in eastern Ukraine. The fighting that followed killed over 14,000 people. Young or old, Ukrainians learned their lesson well.
As a person from Donetsk who survived through 2014, of course I'm concerned because of 2014. In Donetsk, a lot of people also did not believe that Russia can attack, but it attacked. It happened, as they say, the impossible became possible. That's why I absolutely take this seriously, whatever they call it, gossip or information about a possible Russian invasion, and the more seriously you take it, better it is for the state, for the authorities and for every citizen. Russia will not leave us in peace. That's why we have to be always ready for it. It did not start today, but it could tomorrow or after a month. That's why it's good it did not start, but you have to be in a state of readiness all the time.
While NATO and EU have raised objections, the other ally of Russia, China, has stood by it.
The incitement and spread of disinformation by some in the US and the West brought more turmoil and uncertainty to the already challenging world and exacerbated mistrust and division. We hope the parties concerned will stop such a disinformation campaign and do something conducive to peace, mutual trust and cooperation.
A 2015 peace deal brokered by France and Germany helped halt large-scale battles in the region. But regular skirmishes continue. 2022 started with no difference in this nearly decade-long conflict.
Russia released the video of troops being sent to their bases after military exercises. This happens after Russian president announced they do not want conflict and ready to resolve the issue with talks. However, NATO remains skeptical and says de-escalation on ground is yet to happen. Here is the report.
The Russian Defense Ministry on Tuesday released video of what it said were some of its troops returning to base after exercises near Ukraine, leading some to hope the drums of war might be fading. But NATO said it had yet to see any evidence of a de-escalation that could avert a military conflict. Russia did not say how many units were pulling back. Its deployment of some 130,000 troops to the north, east, and south of Ukraine triggered alarms in Western capitals that a military operation could be imminent. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with Russian President Vladimir Putin in the Kremlin Tuesday and said the withdrawal of some Russian troops was a good sign.
Courageous and responsible action is now required of everybody. One thing I want to say, for my generation, war in Europe has become unthinkable, and we must ensure it stays that way.
Putin again denied his country sought conflict.
Do we want it or not? Of course not.
Мы и выдвинули предложение,
This is why we have offered our proposals to start the negotiation process,
которого должна
which should lead to an agreement of providing equal security for everybody, including our country.
страну.
But many remained skeptical. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg told reporters he wanted to see stronger signals of rapprochement.
There are signs from Moscow that diplomacy should continue. This gives grounds for cautious optimism. But so far, we have not seen any sign of de-escalation on the ground.
New footage on Tuesday showed continued Russian military drills, this time artillery firing in Crimea, a region seized from Ukraine in 2014. Russia's show of force near Ukraine's borders has prompted months of frantic Western diplomacy and drawn threats of severe sanctions if it invades, culminating in a crescendo of US and British warnings in recent days that this could happen at any time.
Two countries at the brink of the war in the middle of Europe. Tensions between Russia and Ukraine continue. Putin claims Russia has started withdrawal of troops from the border, partially. But what led to the biggest military build-up since the Cold War? Here is more.
Once a part of the Soviet Union, Ukraine is now facing an invasion by Russia. Over 1 lakh Russian soldiers at the borders with missiles, tanks and artillery. While the military crisis has spooked the world, it was not entirely unexpected. Russia and Ukraine have had a troubled past. The root of the problem is Ukraine's geographical and demographic makeup. Ukraine can be seen as two distinct regions. The eastern region has close historical and cultural ties with Russia, and the western part identifies as more Ukrainian. Eastern Ukraine has been a hotbed of rebellion and pro-Russian sentiment, with rebels allegedly receiving support from Moscow. In 2014, Russia invaded and controversially annexed the Crimean Peninsula from Ukraine. Moscow has been increasing its control on the Donbas region of East Ukraine. This is where the current conflict is brewing. In 2014, Russia and Ukraine signed an agreement in Belarus capital Minsk. The deal was an attempt to secure a ceasefire in the Donbas region. The agreement failed to bring peace, and a new package of measures meant to stop fighting, called Minsk II, was agreed in 2015. To date, the Minsk Accord has failed to serve its purpose. Since 2014, more than 13,000 civilians and 4,000 Ukrainian troops and over 5,650 pro-Russian separatists have died in fighting. To put an end to this deadly conflict, the Ukrainian government was pushing a membership in the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. This bid for NATO membership is at the heart of the current crisis. NATO is a military alliance between the US and the European countries. NATO's main purpose is to unify and strengthen its members through political and military means. According to the treaty, if a NATO member is attacked, it will be considered an attack on all the members of NATO. Since the formation of NATO in 1949, it has expanded massively eastwards. If 12 countries founded NATO, now 30 countries are part of the grouping. If Ukraine joins NATO, it will allow the US to deploy NATO soldiers there. Russia's President Vladimir Putin has made it clear he sees Ukraine's aspirations to join NATO as a threat to Russia's borders and its sphere of influence. Russia has also demanded that NATO rule out further expansion. The US and Europe have warned Russia to face the repercussions and severe consequences if they invade Ukraine. Bureau Report, India Today.
Tensions continue to escalate in Ukraine as Russian troops gather at the border. From economics to geopolitics, here are 5 reasons that could have led to Putin's calculated moves. Here is the report.
Europe is on the edge as the threat of a Russian invasion of Ukraine looms large. As over 1 lakh Russian troops gather near Ukraine's borders, the big question on everyone's mind is, why is Vladimir Putin acting tough? The first key reason: Russia does not want Ukraine included in the Northern Atlantic Treaty Organization, or NATO. Ukraine's entry into NATO would mean any Russian military action on its neighbor will invite counteraction by NATO members. NATO's growing sphere of influence is upsetting for Russia. The Western military alliance has expanded to 30 from 12 nations since its inception. Putin believes this poses a direct threat, with countries like Ukraine becoming potential launch pads for missiles targeted at Russia. According to many accounts, Putin, a former KGB spy, took the breakup of Soviet Union as a humiliation. In 1991, when the world's largest country and once superpower, Soviet Union, disintegrated, losing Ukraine was the most bitter pill to swallow for Russian nationalists. Part of the crisis could also be domestic politics. Vladimir Putin has been in power for over 20 years, either as PM or president. A military offensive in future might not get acceptance. A successful venture could lift his popularity within the country. The biggest counteraction from the West would be in the form of economic sanctions. Russia has formed an axis with China, which is itself at loggerheads with the US. Putin would hope he can weather any Western sanctions with a bit of help from his new friend in Beijing. The big question is, how far is Putin ready to go? Bureau Report, India Today.
Russia has reduced troops deployment across borders after showing military might and having said it's ready to negotiate. However, the US still call Russia a threat, adding that considerable amount of troops is still massing at the border of Russia and Ukraine. Here is more.
The Russian Defense Ministry on Tuesday released video of what it said were some of its troops returning to base after exercises near Ukraine, leading some to hope the drums of war might be fading. But U.S. President Joe Biden responded that Washington had not yet verified the demobilization and said Russia still very much posed a threat.
We have not yet verified the Russian military units are returning to their home bases. Indeed, our analysts indicate that they remain very much in a threatening position. And the fact remains, right now, Russia has more than 150,000 troops encircling Ukraine and Belarus and along Ukraine's border.
Russia did not say how many units were pulling back. Its deployment of some 130,000 troops to the north, east, and south of Ukraine triggered alarms in Western capitals that a military operation could be imminent. Russian President Vladimir Putin, who met with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz on Tuesday, denied again his country sought conflict.
Do we want it or not? Of course not. This is why we have offered our proposals to start the negotiation process, which should lead to an agreement of providing equal security for everybody, including our country.
Speaking from the White House, Biden said he was committed to finding a diplomatic solution to the crisis, but he warned the Russian people that military aggression in Ukraine would be bloody, costly, and would be met with international condemnation.
The world will not forget that Russia chose needless death and destruction.
While Biden said he would not commit U.S. forces to fight in Ukraine in the event of a Russian attack, he said the U.S. would defend, quote, every inch of NATO territory.
With the full force of American power.
U.S. troops have already begun reinforcing NATO allies Poland and Romania.
Ukrainian citizens are trying to keep calm but still living in fear, wondering what Russia might do next. With the threat of invasion looming large, Ukrainians are looking in an uncertain future.
Slava says his son Ivan brings him joy in what he says is a world of hysteria. He doesn't want to leave his home in Kyiv, but says he'd consider doing so to protect his family if Russia were to invade Ukraine.
Every day I'm thinking about what to do with my family. You know, as I go to Lviv, for example, to the western part of Ukraine, or go to a village where my parents of my wife live. They have a small house, but at least they have, for example, they have electric generator, they have solar panels, so at least we will have electricity, for example, and the fridge will be working.
Most people in the city are tired of thinking about what Russia might do next. For 8 years, they've lived with conflict in the east of the country between Ukrainian forces and Russian-backed separatists. But the recent crisis is fueling a renewed sense of anxiety.
Things seem very normal in the city. People are still going to work or to school. The shops and restaurants are busy. But as the situation continues, some people that we meet tell us that they are worried and making contingency plans.
If there is an invasion, we will go to Western Ukraine. But if there is a need to fight, my entire family will.
Russians are just showing off, making noise, play acting. Russians aren't only influencing Ukrainian opinion, but everyone else. But Russia will destroy itself if it invades.
Diplomatic efforts to avert a new war have seemed at times to go round in circles, with little sign of a breakthrough. Moscow now says it's pulling some troops from the border, but Ukraine's government is sceptical.
We continuously hear different statements from the Russian Federation, so we have a rule. We believe not what we hear, but we believe what we see. If we see the pullout, we will believe in the de-escalation.
40 years ago, this huge arch was built on a hill in the city to celebrate Russia and Ukraine's friendship. Since then, someone has painted a large crack in the monument. No one here wants a new conflict, but history has taught them to be prepared. Natasha Butler, Al Jazeera, Kyiv.
Ukrainian veterans across the European Union are ready to battle Russia if need arises. They are planning to head home in case of Russian aggression to be ready to defend their country.
Ukrainian army veteran Dmytro Dovzhenko has been living in Poland with his wife and 2 children since 2019. He runs a business there that handles anything from hairdressing to food. But the situation back home is never far from his mind. The US has been saying for weeks that Russia, which has amassed up to 100,000 troops near the border, could invade at any moment, though Moscow denies having any such plans. Dovzhenko still wears a large signet ring with the inscription "Loyal Forever" from his military marine unit in Ukraine. And if Russia were to invade his home country, he wants to be ready to fight as quickly as possible.
If there's a war, a battle, I'm going back to my military unit. According to the army law, I have 24 hours for that, and I only need 24 hours. Within 24 hours, I'm back in the military.
Dovzhenko runs a foundation of Ukrainian veterans across the European Union. He says he is one of an estimated 700 soldiers in Poland who would be ready to return home and take up arms. Dovzhenko and fellow veteran Serhiy Sklarienko believe that, as there are 10,000 Ukrainian veterans across the EU, the number of those ready to re-enlist is much higher, likely closer to 7,000.
I will tell my boss, sorry boss, I'm going back home to defend my country. You can see for yourself what's happening. The same goes for my colleagues here and in other countries. They will also go back to their military units and say they are ready.
The Ukrainian Ministry of Veterans said in a statement that there are no statistics on how many veterans from the conflict that started in 2014 are abroad. But there are 420,000 people registered as having once defended Ukraine. Showing pictures from his military days, Dovzhenko says the Ukrainian army is far better equipped for war now than it was 8 years ago, when it fought separatists in the Donetsk and Luhansk regions after Russia annexed Crimea.
First of all, the Ukrainian army isn't like it was in 2014. Back then, we didn't have anything. I had a Bundeswehr uniform that was 15 to 20 years old. The only thing I received from my homeland's army was a Kalashnikov machine gun. That's all. Nothing else. In 2015, we got uniforms and the quality got a bit better. Now we have modern weapons, modern medicine. We have everything that we need. And most importantly, we have experienced people.
That is all we have for now. We will continue to update you with what's happening on the ground. I'm Maria Pesarenko reporting from Kyiv, Ukraine. News and updates on the other side of a quick break.